It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
All right. Tyler asks, is there any harm in doing backdoor Roth conversions with income below the Roth IRA limit? My wife and I's income is variable, and it's difficult to predict which side of that 204K limit that we're going to fall on. So, interesting Roth IRA question.
So, Brian, what is a backdoor Roth? I think we got to lay that foundation. What is a backdoor Roth? Why is it necessary? How is it used? And then we can answer Tyler's question around, okay, well, what if I'm below?
Yeah, anybody who's watched our content, y'all, I hate that it's called backdoor Roth because it sounds like it's sneaky, sounds like you're doing something under cover of night, and it's just not that way. All a backdoor conversion, backdoor with my rabbit quotes, is that you're doing a conversion. You're taking traditional IRA contributions, and since in 2010 they took away the income threshold to do Roth conversions to where anybody can do Roth conversions, you can do a non-deductible traditional IRA contribution because maybe you make too much money to do traditional or a regular Roth IRA contribution because there are income limitations on it, that you then convert it over to Roth. Now, that sounds so simple, but there's some caveats to that, meaning that if you have any other IRA assets, I'm talking about SEP IRAs, rollover IRAs, anything that you took a tax deduction on, you could be really stung with the pro rata rules because they're going to make you look at what your value was on the previous year and then prorate the tax consequences of doing that conversion. So you just need to make sure you don't have any IRA assets except for like inherited IRAs. Those are the exception to the rule. But pay attention to that, and then you can know if you do a conversion. Now, Bob, I wanted to talk to you because I'll push it back over because it sounds like there's a lot of variability in their pay, and I've heard you talk to clients about this same issue where income is all over the place. Should you just preemptively do a Roth conversion, or is there some other things that you ought to consider?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you guys, know this, you're financial mutants, so you love dollar cost averaging, and you love that $500 every month individually or $1,000 every month going into your Roth IRAs, and you get so juiced. But then that 1 year happens where your income goes over and you reach out and say, hey, Bo, I did too much, I made too much. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. What a horrible problem to have. We're going to have to go undo your Roth contributions. And it's a nightmare because when you undo Roth, you got to pull out the money you put in, and then you also have to pull out any applicable earnings. So if you were doing monthly $1,000, monthly $500 contributions, you got to pull those out, and then you got to calculate how much earnings, and then that money comes out and it's taxable. And you just want to avoid that if you can. So I end up telling folks, hey, well, we got to postpone until the beginning of next year for you to make your Roth contributions because we want to see where your income is, right? And if you're below the limit, we'll just contribute directly. Or if you're above the limit, we can do a backdoor, assuming that you have the right account structure that Brian mentioned. But then folks say, well, I don't want to wait. I like getting my money working for me. I understand you guys talk about how $1 can turn into $88, so I want to get in there as fast as possible. Okay, no harm, no foul. Even if you are someone who falls under the income threshold and you have the right account structure, no outside IRAs, none of that stuff going on, it's not the worst thing in the world to go ahead and do a backdoor Roth IRA conversion if your account structure will allow for it. So that way you can go ahead and get those Roth dollars in early. You can get them working, but I don't know that I recommend it. I don't know that a lot of folks do that just because you want to kind of see what the year looks like after the fact and make that decision instead of doing it before the fact.
Since a whole conversion strategy requires that extra step of the conversion anyway, why wouldn't you just wait? I feel like I'm Mel Gibson here with the painted face, and I'm like, hold, because you ought to wait. It ought to be like a Braveheart. I would tell people, I don't know that I agree that they ought to just go ahead and default to the Roth conversion.
I'll give you the nightmare, because here's what you have to do if you do this. Here's what you have to do. The way the tax form runs is the way they calculate the pro rata rule is based on 1231 IRA balances. This has happened in the past where we'd have backdoor contributors come to us and said, hey, I just retired, or I just changed jobs, or I just filled in the blank. And we're like, great, let's help you work through 401k rollover, roll it into your IRA, or let's help you figure out how to do that sort of thing. And it's not until we get to the next tax year they say, oh, by the way, did I tell you I was a backdoor contributor? Did I tell you? We're like, oh man, well, because you did that conversion in February and then you retired or changed jobs later in the year, and you rolled into an IRA, that conversion's taxable now. So if you don't make sure that at 12/31 and the end of that year you have a zero balance, you can run afoul. So one of the things that does make sense to braveheart it up and hold is because you can make sure you don't go over those tripwires and have it be taxable when it should not be taxable.
I would rather you just build that $500 a month or $1,000 for a couple into a brokerage account, and then do the one time, hey, let's fund the Roth this year, or let's go do a conversion at the beginning of the next tax year. Because remember, you always have from January to April 15th to fund and do whatever steps you need to. And it's just so much cleaner because, I mean, we are part of the cleanup crew. Think about, what is it, Mr. Wolf from Pulp Fiction or whatever, where we have to go and clean up other people's messes and that stuff. You don't want to get in that situation of undoing the Roth contribution. So I'd rather you get it right by just waiting till the next year. That's my personal preference.
I'll sign up with that. I'm not going to fight you.